Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is May the 2nd, 2024. It has been 3,748 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 72 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 69 days since Russia expanded its war aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Wednesday and Thursday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian male bloggers in social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. There is an elevated risk of large-scale drone and missile attacks against Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure from May the 2nd to May the 10th due to Orthodox Easter, the inauguration of Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin, and the May the 9th Victory Day celebrations in Russia. 2. Russian forces continue to exploit the delays in significant military aid from the US, the Czech Republic-led Ammunition Initiative, Belgium, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, carrying out 100 attacks on Wednesday. 3. US and Ukrainian officials confirmed our early assessment that it would take another 2 to 4 weeks for significant military aid to reach the front lines, which should stabilize Ukrainian ground and air defenses. 4. The world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox, with renewed nuclear threats by Kremlin leadership and Polish leadership openly discussing forward deploying United States nuclear weapons. 5. We maintain it is unlikely Russia will achieve its operational goal of capturing Chasiv Yar by May the 9th, and will continue their efforts to capture the settlement regardless of cost. 6. Russia is setting conditions for a wider attack in the direction of Vuhledar. 7. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs will continue to encourage escalation. 8. The disjointed response to Russian aggression by Ukraine's allies continues to embolden Moscow, leading to the most serious airspace violation of a NATO country since Russia expanded its war of aggression on February the 24th, 2022. Inaction by the United States and the excessively risk-averse rules of engagement forced on the NATO alliance are creating an environment ripe for a serious international incident. 9. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine, and the situation is more serious, especially at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, than what the International Atomic Energy Agency is reporting. Russia attacked civilian targets in Odessa, Kharkiv, Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Russia attacked Odessa with Iskander-M ballistic missiles for the third day in a row, hitting the Nova Poshta distribution and sorting center. Security cameras showed the moment the missile hit the facility, causing a massive fire. Nova Poshta is Ukrainian-based and similar to companies such as DHL and FedEx. Company officials said that the 18 employees working at the time of the attack had moved to a bomb shelter and were uninjured. 14 other people were wounded, with one in hospital. The United States ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, wrote on Twitter, quote, "Tonight, another terrible Russian attack on Odessa with ballistic missiles, hitting a warehouse that sends goods across Ukraine and injuring 13 people. This underscores again the importance of air defense to Ukraine's ability to defend itself against Russia's brutal attacks." Unquote. The number of fatalities from the April 29th missile strike on Kivalov's state climbed to 6. Ukrainian officials also reported that the April 30th missile strike that killed 3 likely targeted a military hospital, which sustained damage. Under international humanitarian law and with few exceptions, military hospitals have protected status. In the Kharkiv Oblast, the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombed Zolochiv, instantly killing a civilian couple in a car. Initially, 2 pensioners were reported as wounded, with the total number climbing to 13, all civilians. The VKS also bombed Liptsi, killing a 78-year-old woman. Russian shelling of the village of Lelyukivka killed a 67-year-old resident, and a Russian first-person view one-way drone struck a tractor in Boguslavka, wounding the driver. In Free Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces fired Smerch rockets on the settlement of Hirnik, killing 2 and wounding 6. The civilian victims ranged from 46 to 77 years old. The village of Kalynova was also shelled, killing 1 and wounding 2. Russian forces attacked Nikopol in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast with artillery rounds, Grad rockets and an FPV one-way drone. The hospital and an ambulance were damaged, as well as a school and private homes. 4 people were wounded in the attack. Russian forces continue to use the perimeter of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to attack the Nikopol rayon. More about that later in the podcast. Here is today's action report. Russia launched 100 attacks on Wednesday and has carried out 604 discrete assaults against Ukrainian positions in the last 6 days. Ukrainian forces have not stabilized the front, but have slowed Russian advances across the entire line of conflict. Former spokesperson of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, retired Colonel Vladislav Seleznyov said that meaningful amounts of US aid would start to arrive on the front lines within the next 2 to 3 weeks. He added that recent Russian missile strikes on logistics centers and railway stations are meant to disrupt shipments to the front. There are multiple reports that US weapons and ammunition are flowing into Ukraine. On April 23rd, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine dismissed Vitaly Polovenko, the Deputy Minister of Defense responsible for improving the material supply system in the rear echelon and at the front. Polovenko was only in the role for 4 months. We can't verify that the dismissal was due to a lack of progress in improving Ukrainian military logistics, but the timing is notable. There are some indications additional artillery ammunition is starting to reach some Ukrainian units. It is more likely these rounds are part of the European Union's initiative to send 200,000 artillery shells to Ukraine, which arrived at the end of March. In April, the number of missiles and Shahed 136 one-way drones used to attack Ukraine dropped significantly. Russia launched 139 various missiles and 292 Shahed 136 one-way drones, an almost 50% reduction compared to March. Over the last 11 months, Russia has used 4,002 Shahed UAVs, averaging 361 a month, which is in alignment with our estimated production capacity of 400 per month. Almost 40% of the missiles used in April were Kh-59 air-to-surface guided missiles or the modernized Kh-69. In our assessment, Russia likely exhausted its strategic reserve in March, limiting its ability to carry out attacks during April. With this short-term limitation, Ukraine has a window of opportunity to move munitions to the front lines. Additionally, Ukraine's partners are squandering an opportunity to provide more air defense munitions and systems while Russia rebuilds its strategic missile reserve. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. It is a good time to open up our war map. There is a link in the podcast description. Ready? We start in the Kharkiv Oblast. It's been almost a month since significant fighting was reported in the Kupiansk area of operation, or EO. East of Kupiansk, GSAFU reported that Russian attacks on Ivanivka, Kislivka and Kotlярivka were repulsed. In the Svatovo of Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts, Russian forces continued to probe Ukrainian defensive lines, attacking near Berestove, Stelmachivka, Kopanki, and in the directions of Makiivka and Hrekivka from occupied Novovodane. In the Kremennaio of Luhansk Oblast, it was a similar situation, with positional fighting and Russian probing attacks in the directions of Nevske, Terny, Yampolivka and Torske. Mutual fighting was reported south of Dubrova, with no change in the situation. In the Siverskoye of Luhansk Oblast, there was no change from yesterday. Russian forces continued their attempts to advance on Bilohorivka from the east and southeast, and carried out more intense attacks in the direction of Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka. In occupied Dovzhansk, two trucks carrying munitions collided, causing both to catch fire, cooking off the ammunition. Northeast of occupied Kubань, 85 kilometers from the line of conflict, 4 ATACMS missiles with cluster munitions struck a Russian training encampment. One was dead, with the second striking a group of 116 Russian troops spreading submunitions over a 350-meter radius. The third missile struck a large group of vehicles in a forested area. It is noteworthy that the entire attack was observed by a Ukrainian drone that provided high-resolution real-time video. We link to the entire video of the attack in our almost daily situation report. There is more information in the podcast description on how you can become a subscriber. Moving to the Donbas, let's start in northeastern Donetsk Oblast. Yesterday, in the Siverskoye of Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces made a significant push in the direction of Spirne, supported by the VKS, which conducted at least 8 bombings of Ukrainian defensive positions. Russian forces were unable to advance, and the intensity of fighting was reduced today. In the Kostiantynivka, Russian forces briefly entered the easternmost part of the Novy micro-district, but were repulsed by Ukrainian forces. Russian troops also continued their attempts to cross the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal northwest of Ivanivske. Russian mercenary mill blogger Wogonzo said that there had been no change in the situation, with Russian forces remaining on the outskirts of Chasiv Yar. The Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armored, reported fighting was ongoing near Klishivka and Andriivka, but didn't make any specific claims of battlefield success. In the Toretsk-New Armored continued to report fighting in the area of Shumy, near the edge of occupied Gorlivka. In occupied Gorlivka, a Ukrainian drone-delivered IED struck the Coal Mercury electrical substation, destroying the electrical infrastructure. In the Avdiivka, Russian forces continued to advance north and northwest of the Krasnogorivka plateau, carrying out 33 ground attacks. Ukrainian forces have not stabilized their defensive lines, but for the 4th day continue to limit Russian advances. Additionally, there is significant fog of war and no clear line of conflict in many areas. Retired Ukrainian Colonel Seleznyov aligned with our earlier assessment that the Russian breach is, in his words, quote, thin, and will require driving a wider wedge to achieve a breakthrough. Fundamentally, nothing has changed from the start of the week. Russia is racing to advance as far as it can, and Ukraine is racing to get artillery rounds and anti-tank weapons to the front lines. GSAFU reported that Russian attacks south of Kalinovo were repulsed. Russian forces have reached Arkhangelsk from Keramik, which will complicate the continued Ukrainian defense on the northeastern part of Ocheretine. Our analysts geolocated a video showing a Russian soldier at the ruins of the railroad station in Ocheretine. The video was only 16 seconds long and captured the sound of nearby gunfire, indicating fighting for control of the settlement continues. To the northwest, Russian forces made marginal gains east of Novo-Alexandrivka. The Ukrainian military evacuated 16 civilians from the village, which was once home to 700. Officials estimate 24 residents, mostly pensioners, remain. Armored reported fighting continued in the area of Berdichi, and a video geolocated in Solovyovo showed a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle with the 47th Motor Infantry Brigade destroying a Russian MTLB armored personnel carrier at close range. GSAFU reported that Russian attacks in the directions of Sokil and Novopokrovsk were repulsed. Ukrainian units continued to hold the Durna River line south of Berdichi. Mutual fighting was reported in Semenivka, while Russian troops continued their attacks east of Umansk and Yasnobrodivka. Russian troops continued their assaults in Netailove and made a new attempt to advance into the garden area south of Pervomaiska. Heavy fighting continued in the Vuhledar Raion. Ukrainian artillery units supporting the defense of Krasnohorivka appear to have received additional ammunition. A Russian armored column of a T-72 main battle tank and 4 up-armored turtle tanks came under fire as they moved north from occupied Mariinka. 4 of the 5 armored vehicles were destroyed before reaching Krasnohorivka, with the surviving tank retreating. If Ukrainian forces can maintain fire control of the ground line of communication, that's a supply line, it will be difficult for Russian troops to maintain control of the area south of the refractory plant. Further south, fighting continued east of Georgievka and Paraskovievka, with no change in the situation. Russia launched a significant offensive from Solodka in the direction of Vodyane, with Ukrainian sources reporting the 72nd Brigade suffered significant casualties while repulsing the attack. Fighting also continued in the Staromlynivka Raion, with Ukrainian forces repulsing Russian attacks south of Urozhaine and west of Staromayorsk. In the Orikhiv Raion of Zaporizhzhia Oblast, positional fighting continued in the no man's land in and south of Robotine. The main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, that's the GUR, intercepted the real-time video feed from a Russian FPV drone. The video confirmed an earlier report that Russian troops are using an area adjacent to Reactor 6 at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to launch drones on Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, in violation of the principles of nuclear safety. A 1500-meter exclusion zone exists around the NPP, making it impossible for Ukrainian troops to fire back. In the Kherson Raion, Russian forces launched 5 attacks on Ukrainian positions in Krynki, suffered losses and retreated. Ukraine appears to have restarted daily attacks on Russian oil refining infrastructure. In the Krasnodar Krai, Ukrainian drones attacked the Afip oil refinery. Russian officials claim the 3 drones were shot down before reaching the plant, but a video shows there was at least 1 hit in the area of the refinery, sparking a fire. The April 30th attack on the Rosneft Ryazan oil refinery severely damaged the ABT-3 distillation unit. This is the second distillation tower damaged at the refinery. A Ukrainian drone attack in the Oryol region damaged energy infrastructure, knocking out power to parts of the oblast. On the night of April 30th, the Voronezh-Nefteprodukt oil refinery in the Voronezh region of Russia was potentially hit by a Ukrainian one-way drone. At the time of recording, we could not confirm if there was any damage. Finally, satellite images showed that the April 20th drone strike on the Kardymova oil depot in the Smolensk region destroyed 14 of the 16 fuel tanks. Here is my Theaterwide update. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky fired the head of the Security Service of Ukraine Information Security Department, Ilya Vityuk, who has held the position since 2021. Vityuk was under suspension after an investigative report by Slidstvo.info exposed the purchase of a $505,000 luxury apartment in Kyiv. The former cybersecurity chief was accused of retaliation against journalist Yevgen Shulga, resulting in his April 9th suspension. Ukraine demonstrated its domestically developed anti-drone electronic warfare system Parasol. Parasol is a portable system that is designed to protect a 200-meter radius from FPV one-way drones. What's going on in the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir? The HUR claimed that Russian contract soldiers from Nepal were deserting in large numbers. Similar to the reports from Cuban contract soldiers, the Nepalese troops reported they are used in human wave attacks, are having their pay stolen, and are being executed by Russian blocking troops and their commanders for refusing to follow orders. Warlord and aspiring dentist Colonel General Ramzan Dondon Kadyrov appointed his 16-year-old son Adam as the head of the Russian Special Forces University in Grozny. The junior Kadyrov's Special Forces credentials include beating a 19-year-old prisoner last year. The chairman of the Nizhny Novgorod City Duma, Oleg Lavrichev, was arrested by the Security Service of Russia in occupied Donetsk, accused of embezzlement by an organized group on an especially large scale. Lavrichev was in the occupied territories delivering humanitarian aid and is suspected of skimming up to 22 million rubles from the charity organization. Investigators in occupied Donetsk provided more information about the murder of mercenary and former Texan-turned-Russian propagandist Russell Bentley. Bentley's charred body was found near occupied Kremenets in his burned-out car, and they had to use DNA for his identification. His wife released a brief video showing the broken and burned remains of his cell phone. Finally, in Moscow, Russia put about 30 pieces of captured Western military equipment on display. One of the trophies was an intact German Leopard 2A6 main battle tank that had been captured undamaged. That wasn't good enough for the Kremlin. Before the display was opened to the public, a heavy concrete block was dropped on the barrel to bend it and damage the stabilization system. Here is the crazy part. Russian officials recorded themselves creating fake battle damage. Oh yes, we'll link to the video. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.